Hey everybody, this is David Skrika. I hope you're all well. Yeah, sorry I didn't have anything out in the weekend. So Saturday I was just kind of doing a research day, and then I was going to do it Sunday, and then Sunday was really hot here. Probably the first really. It's been actually considering too. Everyone's predicting a big hurricane season with El Nino picking up again, but it's been a pretty, I would say I consider it pretty cool spring, April and into mid-May now. And but yesterday was kind of the first really kind of hot, humid type day, no breeze or not much breeze. So, and I guess it was Mother's Day because so people were probably mostly, visiting family and home and blasting ACs. And here the power system is not the best. It's these old diesel generators and stuff. For some reason, the islands, even though we have all the sun and wind, actually two places where solar and wind power would make sense. They've always gone to these diesel. Good thing is they're going to install a solar installation at the power plant here. So hopefully one either that or the diesel, one or the other will be up. So anyhow, I called my buddy who worked there. The power went off around noon. I'm like, okay, fine. It's hot. I get it. Middle of the day. And then about an hour or two later, I'm like, okay, I'm charging up the generator. And because I just wanted some music on and doing my TV on and stuff like that. And then around 3 or 4, I'm like, you know what, this is kind of going on too long. And I write the guy again, and he's like, everyone's it's AC, blah blah blah. Keep the generator running, it ain't coming on anytime soon. So here it is, 9:30 in the morning on Monday, and it's still off. So we're going on about 21 hours it's been off, and and it's really nice now. Luckily it's nice. I can run up my generator again. I ran it till about 11 p.m. last night, midnight, and then didn't sleep that great because I like to have a fan on me. um and there's some island story for you at some point. At some point I got to go solar myself. I keep saying this, but it's more of the headache of doing the whole installation rather than the cost. But I got to do it at some point, or at least do it to the point where, like, I have a small solar setup that can kind of, kick in and power some fans and maybe even a small AC, when something like this happens. So, especially if, if a hurricane hits. Okay, so that's it. So today's going to be a fun update. Yeah, I'm glad I waited to today because I would have been in a pretty sour mood doing this yesterday. I would have been in a bad mood. Because it also was hot and humid today. It's beautiful, breezy, perfect type weather. So I'm sitting here, I got the door open, the breeze is kind of coming into my living room. So let's do it. Today we're going to look at parabolic curves because I think it's kind of what because of what the AI, whole entire sector has done recently. And I just seen another parabolic curve sector, uh, it kind of form. So the thing is, all parabolic curves collapse. Now, it doesn't mean that ultimately some of these assets cannot go higher. Like Amazon went parabolic with all the .coms in 2000. So did Microsoft with all the tech stocks. And then both of those, a few decades later, are hitting new all-time highs. But it can often take time. Like the Dow, is much higher than 400 than it was in 1929 now. But again, it can take some time, right? So I just wanted to show you this. This is some interesting stuff here. So this is the first parabolic curve we're going to show is the 1929 crash, and then we're going to show you a chart of the crash, which kind of shows you, look, it doesn't matter if a company's into a new technology, if it's changing the way some things are happening in the world. Again, if it goes parabolic, it's probably going to collapse at some point, right? So you can see the Dow, this was the classic parabolic move. You can see like the last move from 28 to 29 was almost 100%, or 27, 28 to 29. You can see actually this little correction in the mid 20s, the Dow was 150 and it went to 380. And then of course it collapsed back down here in the 30s. So, and it actually took back the entire bull market of the 1920s and then took nearly 25 years before it went higher. And then one of the main stocks we have is RCA. So RCA, remember, this was radios at the time, making radios. Radios were a new technology. Like our internet and AI and crypto or whatever of today were, the car, the automobile, radio, electricity even of back then. Even railroads were, because there was really no planes, commercial airlines back then. So there were none. So airlines were basically railroads were how you would have traveled the country. It's funny, sometimes I watch some of those old shows like Boardwalk Empire, and just remember there's a part where the guy stops over in Chicago on his way to going out west, and he's coming from New York, and you just think, well, yeah, going from New York to California was a big trek back then. So that's why California didn't really start to really grow till mass transportation came in. Because just think, like, if you decided to up your family and say, okay, there's a better life for me in California or Oregon or Washington than in New York or Connecticut, just think of the undertaking that would have been back 100 years ago or 150 years ago. So there you go. So yeah, we can see though RCA went from like a single digit stock in 1924 to $120 here. Now it took it. Actually, what's interesting about RCA is it actually peaked in early 29 and didn't really go there, but still this was parabolic enough. And actually it gave you a good window, because this would have been about 9 months, roughly, where you could have got out. And then you can see that crash here. There was a little rebound here, and then RCA basically went back to being a single digit stock. But again, like this, radios were the new technology. The fact that you could sit there, listen to music, listen to sports games, listen to, they would have like stories, or the version of what we would call television shows. Then they would have series on the radio that you would tune into every week. So this was a new way for people to communicate, and it came from two technologies: the electricity you needed to obviously power your radio, and then the actual radio itself. But you can see, like, people would have looked at RCA the way they look at Nvidia today, or the way that, again, they looked at Microsoft in the late 90s, and it collapsed. So let's look at some of these things now today, just to do this. So we're going to go look at Nvidia. So look, and it's not a science here when it comes to the parabolic curves, because I shorted Nvidia in 2022 and did quite well shorting it in 2022, because I thought Nvidia had gone parabolic here. And if you actually look at Nvidia and get rid of this huge move here, it did. And then it did have a nearly 70% drop, before you can see this basically 9-to-1 gain from here. So my question is, do we see one more move up in Nvidia, or is this a topping formation? Usually the parabolic curves are not like that RCA chart. Usually it's just kind of like straight up and straight down. So I still think that the fact that Nvidia peaked roughly 2 months ago and is still pretty close to its highs, I think it might have one more run in it. And just seeing what happened in the first quarter. Remember, the first quarter is really when they report next week. It's the first quarter earnings, end of April earnings, and that's when everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. And because everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, buying Nvidia chips in the first quarter, wanting to kind of get part of this momentum, I would expect this quarter's earnings are still going to be very strong. The May report. It's like the reports after that where you might start seeing some of the momentum wane, because I don't think you're going to see as many people on the bandwagon. So, but anyhow, if we get a predefined range here, right, start to thing. So we'll just show you. It's like I said, this is when I show you it's not really a science. So we're going to go. Yeah, so you can see Nvidia looked parabolic as hell here, going back 20 years, and that's part of the reason I showed it. But notice that even when it did go parabolic, and a 70% decline before this next move. So that's one thing to take note, is that, yeah, once here, you can see in the short term, Nvidia had very little upside. And again, if we kind of go to where it is now, we can kind of see the same thing. You can even see it even more so here, where other than maybe going up another 200 points or something, you can kind of see this potential parabolic curve. And now it's even more parabolic. You look at the MACD below, et cetera, like, way higher than the 2021 peak. So then SMCI is another one. And then we're going to show you some past ones. SMCI, you can see same kind of thing here. I guess with SMCI, it kind of broke a little more recently, but you can see it's still pretty high. Oh, it's not updating. 1 second. Give me a second. Yeah, there we go. So you can see it kind of broke here. So the question with SMCI, did it kind of break? Because you can see this big break. It's a big move from 1200 to 700, right? So we'll have to see if that really broke um, um, in the last few days. So anyhow, that's that stock there. So you can see that. So now we're going to go back to the Nasdaq in 2000s, and what we'll see is, and we'll also look at the home builders. So what we'll see is, despite the fact that the Nasdaq, I was just watching a really interesting interview with this guy here, Hugh Henry, who called. He's a very conservative investor, but he called the 2008 crash. He made 31% in 2008, and he said usually he makes 1 to 6% a year. He's very conservative in his fund, and what he kind of is conservative. Then when he foresees something, he positions himself for it. He's talking about maybe this summer or fall, a large correction happening. And one thing that he said that's really interesting when we look at these recent parabolic curves is, after that 1929 crash, we really did not see a parabolic market until, I would say, the late 70s in terms of commodities. So it was 60 or 50 years later. And he talked about how, the NASDAQ, a major index, falls 80% in 2000. That's a once in 100-year event. Yeah. The last time a market fell that much was 1929. And that was, 70 years prior. And, but then the S&P fell 65% and the home builders fell 80%, 80 to 90%. So then we saw another once in 100-year event happen just within the next 8 years afterwards. So he just talks about why this is happening. And one of the things I like what he says is that because everything is manufactured in Asia, and especially in China, we've gone from being an entrepreneurial society to an asset-based society, which happened. Like, I've talked about this as like saying that, in the 70s, there was a lot of wealth and money around. You could make money, like companies like Microsoft and Apple were created in the 70s and 80s before all these asset bubbles, right? So there was still a lot of opportunity. But so what I really think, so I'm just sipping on some water here. So what I really think is that he's correct. He's 100% correct in this assumption, and this asset-based society has caused these bigger booms and busts. Like, look at it again. Look at the crypto market the last few years, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I think has happened as well. So you can see the Nasdaq here when it went parabolic, and now it didn't have quite as long as a decline or base or time to get to new highs as the Dow in 1929, but you can see it kind of based here for 10 years afterwards. It had to move up, then fell back near the lows in 2008. And if we go out here, I think the Nasdaq passed a high like in 20, I think it was 2017, 2018. So it took nearly 20 years still, right? And really, the Nasdaq had a base between about 2,200 and 1,000 of the Nasdaq 100 going into 2012. So really 12 years after the top, the Nasdaq had a big base where it basically went nowhere. So that's kind of what happens after these parabolic curves. So we'll look at the Nikkei as well. And like, look, at one reason these again, we're talking about asset-based societies, but one reason these stock markets now I think are going back a little quicker. Like the Nikkei and the Nasdaq, part of the reason they went up is, let's face it, both the US and Japan printed trillions and trillions of dollars, right? So what occurred is when they printed trillions and trillions of dollars, that helped. Like the Japan really started opening up his balance sheet in 2014. And of course, the Nikkei has gone there. But you can see this parabolic curve of the late 80s. If we go back to 1980, you'll see it even more so. Yeah, you can see this huge move. Like the Nikkei after the 1987 crash was 16,000. It peaked at 40,000. So that was just over 2 years later, and it was up 150%. So, and then it collapsed. And then you see there was this huge, really, from the early 90s when it collapsed, nearly 30-year period where the Nikkei traded between about 22,000 on the upside and 8,000 on the downside. And this also comes to the fact that the Nasdaq, the same thing. When something goes down 80%, you want to buy it. just start buying it. Who knows when it turn around? Like if you bought the Nasdaq when it's down 80% from its highs in 2008, 2009, right? What you would see is, it did nothing for years and years. It actually went sideways for roughly 4 years, but then you would have this huge gain of 5x. And even with the yen falling about 30 to 40% in the same time, that's still a huge gain, right? So anyhow, that's Nika. But again, parabolic curve and then collapse and then goes nowhere for decades. So then we'll go look at some of these big tech stocks. So we're going to again get back to that tech bubble. So Microsoft, you can kind of see, well, again, you would see it now. See, again, look how much higher some of these things went now. But in 2000, you can see went parabolic, Microsoft crashed, and then essentially went nowhere for decades until recently. And look, it's really, again, obviously Microsoft has a lot doing AI and cloud. It has recreated itself as a company. But essentially, also with Microsoft, what you have to understand is it's a lot of this, again, cheap money. Microsoft is a huge company proponent of the buybacks, etc. So then Amazon goes parabolic here, kind of like our RCA radio company. It took a little while for this to top out, and then it fell. At the time, this is adjusted for splits. It was about 110. I guess if split about 20 to 1 since then, and the low was about 5. So you can see it was almost a quarter. So that's what it did. So it fell 95%, and we know that it has now gone parabolic again. But again, a parabolic curve that collapsed, and it took Amazon a number of years. Like Amazon didn't really start beating those all-time highs again till about 20. It was one of the first ones. But 2011, 2012, you're talking 11, 12 years later. So, and now you can see it's gone even more parabolic. Here, let's look at here. Judging by this Amazon chart here, I think we're going to take this high out of 2020. And again, notice when it really went parabolic in 2020, it still had a 50%, over 50% decline. I think we're going to take this out. This is kind of, again, lining up with maybe my 1987-29 scenario where Hugh Henry is saying this summer, and I'm saying the blow off will happen into the summer, and then the crash will happen in the fall. And a chart like this kind of has me thinking that, because I think this would take out the highs and then blow off to a new high, and then of course, go down. So also parabolic curves were commodities in the late 80s. If you look at gold in 1980, the last year gold went from 275 to 800, and then the gold price basically stayed between $250 and $500 an ounce for 25 years afterwards. Silver, went from $50 to the single digits and stayed in the single digits for the most of, again, the next 30 years that followed. So again, parabolic curves all collapse. So, and I've shown you, SMCI and Nvidia and etc. So I just wanted to show you this is really interesting. This is a long-term thing. Who knows if you can really time it? Like I said, I thought most of these things in 2021 had done that. Some of the smaller cap companies, one company that I trade in and out of sometimes is FUBO, and you can see FUBO. Okay, we'll have to get a shorter term chart, but these little things really did. You can see FUBO went boom, but it didn't. Well, that's 2016. It wasn't really that real of a company back then. We're gonna do this now. The move we really want to find is, you can see FUBO went parabolic here in 2020, right? It went from, $10 to $60. And then and that's another thing too about these parabolic curves. You usually you do get one more bounce like that to get out of, but you can see it went parabolic, and now FUBO is, this is it's even lower than $1.94 now. I think it's $1.30 now. So that's kind of what you see today in this, but and then you can see, like, since when the parabolic curve collapsed, FUBO has essentially been in this trading range of about $1 to $5 going back to 2022 now. So basically nearly 2 years. So that's what happens as well. Oh, the next pair, the last oh no, I want to show you the home builders. The home builders, and we can see that they went parabolic way back in 2006. They've gone parabolic again, by the way. So again, we take this, And you can see this parabolic move and this decline here, and then like a long period of doing nothing. And then just in the last few years, they picked up. Like the home builders really were kind of doing nothing into about 2016, and then they really started to soar again in 2017, 2018. And again, this all has to do again with this financially based economy, the zero rates that occurred, all the printing of money. That's why some of these parabolic curves, like home builders, which just collapsed from 2005, just collapsed recently, have been able to hit new highs. Again, I think it's because of all the financial engineering and cheap money that goes on. But I would watch for these again because they look like to me like they're entering another bubble here. So again, you can see it took a little while for it to really peak out. There's the first move. There's a little bounce that I talk about. So maybe we have seen the highs. Maybe this is just the bounce. But let's watch the home builders as well here going forward, and then we'll look at like for example, let's look actually at the whole home builder stock. This is Toll Brothers, and yeah, Toll Brothers, and then you can see Toll Brothers went parabolic here, collapsed, and it's kind of gone that route again. NVR is another. Let's look at these. Same thing. These are really NVRs are very well run, but you can see it went up here, down, and then boom. So home builder. So we're going to look at the next one is 3D printing stocks, classic parabolic curve. And they were kind of the first bubble asset of this bull market from 2009 to 2014. You can see what they did. And then they completely collapsed here. You can see as well. And now actually, it's actually where it was pre the bubble blow off. We're back to where we were in 2010. This is the kind of thing I'm hoping for. If there is a big bust, is that you can see the stock is 385. Is that if there's a big bust, maybe this can go back to $1 or $2, which it was in 2009. So that sort of thing. And then we'll look at another home builder. So, and then I'll look at two more stocks I think are parabolic curves at the moment. They have nothing to do with anything. This is KKR. It's a leveraged finance company. It's close to breaking out here, but you can see this huge move it's had. Again, really benefited from cheap money, et cetera, because they're doing leverage buyouts, they're using debt to do it. Asset prices going up is really good for that business, et cetera. And then Wingstop. Excuse my language, but effing chicken wings goes from a few dollars or $20 a share to almost 400 today, and trades at like 130 or 140 times earnings. So I kind of like KKR and Wingstop as potential shorts rather than Nvidia because their premiums, they'll probably be easier to borrow stock against or cheaper. And then you'll probably have you'll probably have cheaper premiums in the options as well because they're not the ones like everyone wants to short Tesla. Just like everyone wants to buy them on the short side, everyone wants to short Tesla and Nvidia because they're the big names. But I think these stocks have just as much downside and a lot less premium. I was looking at the KKR stocks and premiums, not really that bad. So, oh yeah, and like for example, another thing that happened I saw recently, someone sent me a link. The Nvidia CEO was on 60 Minutes. Like these are all kind of things are like like I think Bill Gates was all over the news in 1999, and these are kind of all the things that kind of happen right near a top because obviously stock goes up, everyone's enthralled with it. There were guys who were stock market analysts in 1929 who almost became like famous all-stars or famous people, like they were famous as baseball players or actors and actresses, etc. So, okay, this is a little long today, but I hope you enjoyed it. I think it was really interesting. So remember, all parabolic curves collapse. A lot of them can go parabolic longer and higher than you ever think possible, but that's just the way things work, that's just the way it is. And especially when it's in a quick period of time. Again, when you got Wingstop going from 150 to almost 400 in essentially less than a year, that's probably a sign it's a real parabolic curve. So I hope you enjoyed this and everybody take care.